Welcome to People Love Process. I've been running my own design firm and providing a range of creative services going on 23 years now. Over that time, I've experienced the good, the bad, and the ugly side of the creative industry. I hope you find this educational, entertaining, and maybe even laugh a few times while I'll take you through everything. So let's jump into it. I'm calling this the good, the bad, and the ugly design stories. Now, that comes from a movie title, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. And that's how I've categorized three types of stories that I'm going to tell you. More than three stories, but three categories. So over the years, I've created a lot of logo designs. And not every project goes as smooth as I want it to. Now, it's not just relegated to logo type creative projects. Other ones have come up along the way as well, and I'm going to cover most of those. Now, there's one I'd like to cover, but I had to sign an NDA, so I don't know. Maybe in a couple years, I'll just go ahead and do it anyway. That was a national brand, but let's go ahead and get started with what I'm going to call the good. This is the good stuff that happens in our industry, which is really nice when it does. And the first story I want to tell you about is back when I used to work for Upper Deck. I worked on their staff inside of an art department. We had about 25 artists. I worked on the Major League Baseball team, but I was so used to working so fast that they would give me other projects to work on. And it was just a blast. I loved working there, made some lifetime friends there that I still stay in contact with today, worked there for about 3-4 years, moved back to Oregon, continued to do freelance for them for the next decade. And it was just a lot of fun. But on the side, my freelance, why I was working there is I had an illustration rep, and they landed me my first editorial illustration project for New York Magazine. And New York Magazine was doing articles on the rat problems in New York City. One was the subway. This was the first spot illustration I did, which is kind of fun, simplified style. And the next one was a fun one about them coming through the drains up through people's toilets. And I did this one. So I don't do this style that much anymore, like hardly ever. But back then it was because editorial illustrations, the timelines are very, very restrictive. So I didn't have a lot of time to work on this. Later on, when I was in Upper Deck, my art rep got me a job to do daily spots for the Wall Street Journal on the Nagano Olympics going on in Japan. They would email me the story in the morning, and I had to do it over lunch at Upper Deck and get the illustration done in black and white and send it back. That was kind of stressful, but it was fun too. So a style that I developed back then, don't really do much of this anymore, but it was a lot of fun doing that project. Now, I did discover a style. When I was growing up, my parents had an LP collection, and it was a big cabinet with all these LPs in it. And I always gravitated towards these big band albums because the artwork was so cool. I didn't come to find out until years later after art school that that artwork was done by Jim Flora. So this style was inspired by my childhood and seeing Jim Flora, who is art director for RCA Records back in the 50s, but way ahead of his time. So this was a cover I did for Oregon Business about the arts in Oregon. So this was a lot of fun. Here's another kind of cover I did for the Sydney Morning Herald in Australia, a newspaper. And back then I used to hide my name Glitchka. You can see that showing up here. And this got me a lot of work. This style, I did a lot of editorial type work. It's still one of my favorite styles. It just, I don't get requested to do it that much anymore because editorial has kind of gone the way of the dinosaur with digital age now. So my last editorial client kind of retired about 5 years ago, so I haven't done much editorial since then. But still a fun style to work in. Here's another spot I created for some magazine. Can't remember what it was, but again, a style that I don't work in a lot, but it's still one of my favorite styles. Here's another one. This was for a insurance company that had a publication they put out every month, and I was doing the illustration for. And it was about wanting to reverse a bad call. And that's why he's thinking Control Z to reverse a call. The player's pretty upset. So kind of a fun style. So what I initially did, though, is I started working at an agency. It's when I moved back to Oregon. I was already kind of exploring this style more. And I was approached by a band called the Almost Famous Band, and they were trying to raise money for cystic fibrosis. And they asked me, they had seen my style, and they said, hey, could you do an album cover in that style? And I said, sure. So, of course, I was inspired by Mambo Cats by Jim Flora, who created it back in the 1950s. That's where I got the styling from. And I did my own hand lettering to kind of fit that style, but this was the album cover. It was the first illustration I ever submitted to Communication Arts, and it got in Communication Arts Illustration. So that was kind of cool as well. Something that was a first for me at that time. Once again, this back in like 1990 when I did this. So a fun style. I went on to do other things where I created a pet monster or a pet fish. And it's after I read a book by, Sam, now I can't remember Sam's last name. But the book is called Zing. And it's just, you could read the book in 2 hours. It's that simplified. But it's a great book, and it made me think because it asks you questions. And one of the questions it asked in one of the chapters was, what do you do every day that you don't even think about, but nobody else would do? And I'm going, well, that's interesting. And I thought about it. And then I looked down at my keyboard. In the back row of my keyboard, I always put these doodles in there, and so they're sticking up looking at me. And I go, well, nobody does that, I guess. And I'm going, but so what? And then I go, hey, I could do keyboard characters. And so I came up with all these characters, and these were 2 of them. And so you would take your keyboard and you could go ahead and place these characters behind the back row of your keys, and they'd stare at you. And I had these printed, professionally printed and die cut, only to have Apple, like literally 3 weeks after I got the printed pieces done, come out with new keyboards where you couldn't do this anymore. So they quickly became bookmarks, and I still have a box of them in my closet. So keyboard characters, good idea for the 3 weeks I was able to capitalize on it. But I had some fun ones in here, like the Creative Robot, Creative Juice, Power On and Off. I have Feed Your Imagination. That's why he's feeding an alligator. A Joker, your typical cubicle drone. So a lot of fun with these, but it's a fun style. I had a friend who ran a Mac-based website, so I created a design for him showing a Mac geek. And you can see the timeline here. We have flip phones and the click wheel iPod. So you could tell what era this was done in. But I still love this style. I love the simplification of it. And this was for T-shirts. And then there was a iPod Lounge when before Apple sued him, told him they needed to change the name. And this was artwork I did for them for a T-shirt of theirs. And I don't know, just a lot of fun. The style is still really fun to work with. Here's another style that I did. I don't think I've ever done another illustration in a style like this, but it was based on the original click wheel, which I always thought was, I really liked it. I like the buttons on here as well. So none of that exists anymore. I have a friend who collects Apple devices, and he has every iteration of every Apple device. I don't know where he stores it all, but that's what he does. But I always like this. And again, this was for a T-shirt. It was a gray T-shirt, so it only had a couple colors that printed: white, dark gray, and the medium gray. So kind of a cool way to do a design. There's styles that I've done once and haven't really done since. This is when I worked for a small design firm here in Oregon before I left to go to Upper Deck. And you can see even at this time, I love baseball. I still love baseball. It's my favorite sport. I like the history of it. I like the stats of it. And I decided for a project that we had at the design firm to do this in Scratchboard. So I think I based this pose off of Robert Clemens or I can't believe I can't remember Clemens, whatever his first name is. Roger Clemens, I think is his name. Really classic pose, but this was a lot of fun to work on. Haven't really done it since. I can't find the Scratchboard I used to use. It's this cheap stuff now that I don't like. But eventually I'd like to experiment with this even more. Now, the very first project I ever did in Adobe Illustrator was this one. Now, I had switched back in 2002, and then as every project came in, I had used freehand for 15 years prior to that, and as every project came in, I would analyze it and go, do I know how to do this in Illustrator? Nope, I'm doing it in freehand. And on this project, I'm going, I think I know how to do everything I need to do in Illustrator, so I did it on this project. Randy is a former Marine, a brilliant coder and entrepreneur. He came up with Piranha System was a product idea of his, but he wrote all the code for threat assessment on the server side. And this was his original software to provide to companies for threat assessment security on the server side. So fun project to work in. I like the business card, but it was my very first project in Adobe Illustrator. And I had to completely forget everything I knew. So most of that artwork I showed you initially with all this segmented artwork, like the Almost Famous fan, all that was created in Macromedia Freehand, not Adobe Illustrator. So it's at this point that I made that switch, and it was a painful one. And just to give you a little story, I got so frustrated after the first year of using Illustrator because nothing was like freehand at all. I had to completely forget vector building the way I did it in freehand and learn the way Illustrator deemed it necessary to create. It was just nuts. And so I wrote a blog post back when I did a blog and kind of vented and listed all the problems I saw with their software that shouldn't be that way, especially if they bought Macromedia. Why can't you just adapt it into your software? They never did. Well, I take that back. They took some features and kind of did a half-baked job of baking them, like sub-select, which I still don't use because it doesn't work that great. In freehand, I use it all the time. So that's why I'm so dedicated to layers, because without it, it's hard to select certain things at times in Illustrator. But I wrote a blog post, posted it. Well, somebody at Adobe read that, and they thought, this is really good feedback, and they printed it out and put it on the marketing director's desk for Adobe Illustrator. And that marketing director gave me a call. And he was a great guy. His name was Terry Hemphill. And we became friends over the years, and I did work for him. And he asked me if I would be on the beta team because that's the kind of feedback they needed. And so that's how I initially started meeting some of the developers of Adobe Illustrator, was through Terry. He would introduce me, and I'd get to know their engineers over the years. I'm still friends with a lot of them, and that's how that started. So the first ever project in Adobe Illustrator. Now, Randy is a maverick entrepreneur. He went on to do other product ideas like Flowscope, and he hired me to brand it. He did Shadow Meter, another one. I branded that. He sold his first company. That made him independently wealthy. He bought a vineyard, decided to come up with some sensor technology and coding to drive it called Vine IQ. I developed that branding for him. He went to a conference, didn't like the branding, and he said, Vaughn, can you rebrand it for me? and then I'll sell it to the conference for you. And I go, sure. So we did that, Mobster Network Anomaly Detection. He decided he didn't like the coffee company as his area. So he started a coffee company, and he said, I want to name it Three Notch Coffee Roasters, explain the history. Goes back to the Revolutionary War and the writers who would go down a pathway, and wherever they saw three notches on the tree, they knew they were going the right direction. Well, turns out there's another coffee company called Three Notch Coffee, so we had to change the name. So we ended up changing it to Crozet Coffee Company based off of that area and the person who founded that area. So that was a lot of fun. And he worked for the railroad. That's why this one has that worked into it. He had me rebrand his church because he didn't like his church logo. So I did that. I go, okay, bring it on. I'll take anything you got. And he started a new company. And this one was utilizing artificial intelligence. This is before all the modern companies like Adobe and Google ever got into it. He was doing it at least 8 years before. He started Counterflow AI, which is threat assessment for the server side. But he has such great thinking. That's why I love working with him. He thought, hey, you know what? A dragonfly almost has 360-degree visibility, so it can see anything, and that's how it can track it and capture it. That's how I want my software to be. So I want the brand mark to be based off of the inspiration of a dragonfly. So that's why I created that. He ended up building that business up. He sold his first business to the Department of Homeland Security's contractor called FireEye. This second one, I was on Instagram or LinkedIn one day, kind of scrolling through the feed, trying to find another article I read. And I see this logo come up. I go, oh, Randy posted something. I read it only to find out that another company had just bought his company out. That's the second time he built up a company and sold it. The guy is just amazing with knowing marketing, knowing how to brand, knowing how to, well, he does fabulous coding, so none of the previous would matter if he didn't. And he builds up a company. Well, the next company calls me 3 months later and says, Vaughn, I'm starting a new company. It's called Rockfish Robotics. It's based off of the Rockfish Valley in the area I live in. I like the name. And I go, I can work with that. So this is one direction I did. Using Rockfish, and I like the bubbles on this, that it's code, binary code. And we created different directions for him to present to him. The one he went with is the one on the far right, the Rockfish Robotics. So that was kind of cool. He's gone on since then to have his studio built by a company called Timberline Builders. He didn't like their logo, and so he hired me to rebrand them and donate it to him. So I'm going, dude, I'll do anything you throw my way. He helped another person who does brilliant coding. He had a product called Galileo Networks or Systems, I think. And so in the process of working that out, I kind of developed this style because I wanted to show him one that actually shows a representation of Galileo, the famous scientist who the product was named after. So it led to developing a new style, which is kind of cool. Ultimately, they went with this direction that I created for that. And he's been fun to work with. And that's all part of all the good stories I've had. And there's also good stories that start off where this was for a food-based product for an agency based out of San Francisco, and they create seaweed product, and they go, we want you to do a brand character for us. It's on seaweed, and we're thinking of the sea otter. And I'm going, you sure sea otter is the best way to represent that? Because sea otters are like dark brown. It's like, and seaweed is green. I mean, when seaweed goes bad, it turns brown, but I would think you'd want to pick a different animal that has, green attributes to it, like a sea turtle. And they're going, well, if you want to show us that, you can, but we also want to see what the sea otter would look like too. So I did this to show him the sea otter, but we also showed him this as one of the iterations of how they could do a sea turtle. And They agreed. They said, you're right, the sea turtle is the way to go, but we want you to kind of explore the sea turtle. So we did a lot of different ways to handle it. They ultimately went back to the original idea because it was more graphic. It wasn't an illustration. And so that's where Gimme Organic came from. And I see this in the stores. This is always fun to see your own work on the shelves. I've gone on to do packaging design for them. So a lot of fun to work on that project. Here's another one where I don't mind going to the dentist, like to get my teeth cleaned. I rarely, if ever, get cavities. I'm pretty laborious when it comes to, dental care and brushing and flossing and all that. But I went there to get my teeth cleaned one time, and they shot me up with Novocaine, and then they left, and I'm kind of looking around the room, and I see this roll of stickers, and I could tell it's for kids that come in. They give them a sticker, and it had a character, and I go, that's kind of cool. And I go, she came back in, cleaned my teeth, she is all done, and I go, hey, can I get one of those stickers? And she looks at me and says, those are for kids. And I said, come on, give me a sticker. She gave me a sticker. I went home and I noticed it said Smile Makers. I looked it up, and that's what the company does. They do stickers and other things for dental offices. And so I contacted them. They asked to see samples, sent them samples, and they hired me to do a set of germ-based stickers. So these are some of the characters we did about germs, and it's about washing your hands and stuff so you avoid getting germs. And my favorite germ was this guy. I thought he was cool. So that was a project, only to find out that their art director was somebody that I had known years earlier, but I didn't know whatever happened to him. We kind of lost contact. So it reconnected me with an old friend. And he goes, I saw your stuff come in, and he made this comment to me. I just never thought you'd want to do stuff for us. And I go, dude, why? This is fun. I love doing this. And I've done stickers for him ever since. It's gone on to other things. We did art prints and postcards that dental office could use. And they wanted kind of fine art, dental themed artwork. And so we created it. Here's one we created. It's kind of strange, but it's still kind of cool. It's still kind of artistic. So those were a lot of fun. And ultimately, I ended up flying out, going out and doing a workshop with their employees and their marketing department, which was a lot of fun. So Warren Buffett owns the company called Smile Makers. Now that Savannah is out on her own, I kind of gave that client to her. So she still does stickers for him whenever the need arises. So that was a fun client to make. And what I want to do is I want to encourage you, even if you don't draw on a regular basis, take advantage of some of the things out there that come up every year. And one of them is Inktober. And I'm just going to show you some of my Inktober drawings because this is a fun thing to do. And I don't follow their list of what to draw. I just draw whatever I want. That makes it more sustainable. That makes it easier. You don't want to be forced to draw something you wouldn't you wouldn't spend any time doing anyway. So that's why I ignore the list that they put out, and I just do whatever comes to mind. This was some of them here. The coffee cup one is probably my favorite of all these. And then this is the process I use. Here's one I did, and I forgot what this was. And when I posted on Instagram, I even wrote a story about what does this mean. I'm not going to read this, but you can check out the free download that's part of this movie. It comes with a multi-page PDF of this presentation. You can read it. It's kind of funny, but this is the process I use to create all of these. It's not hard, just simple pencil drawing. Then I ink it. This brings us to the bad. Now, the bad is just what it implies, the bad, so let's dive into it. A lot of you probably realize and have watched the movie on my channel that I created the D&D brand mark, the world's most popular ampersand is what I would say, the dragon. Now, the story isn't about that project. That was an awesome project. And it's people who have stolen my artwork over the years. And one time, somebody was on a crowdsourcing site. I don't remember offhand what site specifically it was, but the product of the company that had come to the crowdsourcing service to find a logo for their brand, which was for skateboard bearings called Dragon Ball was the bearing name. Somebody had taken my ampersand and utilized it and won that competition, and somebody noticed it and said, hey, that's not yours. So-and-so did this, and put in my link to my website that showed that. And so I got contacted by the owner of Dragon Bearings, and I said, yeah, you can't use that. Hasbro is going to sue you if you do. And so he was stuck in a bad situation. Of course, the crowd service company, they pulled it down, but they wouldn't refund any money or anything. So they're not very ethical in that sense. And so this is what I told the guy. I go, how about this? I will create what I would call a kissing cousin of the D&D mark. It's not going to be the artwork the same, but I can style it in such a way that captures the attributes you might like, but it will be yours to own outright and you can use. He said, okay. So I gave him a quote. He approved it and we moved forward on it. And this was the design that I came up with for Dragon Bearing. Now, I even made the dragon itself kind of read like a letter D. I did that on purpose. Now, him and his partner, he loved it, shows his partner, and for whatever reason, his partner says, I don't like it. And I'm going, what? Wait, what do you mean? Yeah, he goes, I like it, my partner doesn't, so we're not going to use it. And I go, okay, well, I'm going to use it, so you know what? You don't have to pay me. I'm going to do stickers with it because I thought it came out good. And I did stickers, and I posted them and shared them on Instagram, and he calls me back and he goes, damn it, that looks so cool. I don't care what my partner said. We're going to use it. So I'll go ahead. So go ahead and set up all the final assets and stuff. And they ended up using it. I went on to design their packaging for Dragon Bearings. Oh, that's right. It wasn't Dragon Ball. It was Dragon Bearings. Fireball is the name of their company. Now, you know how Randy, the entrepreneur guy who will see a company and not like his logo and hire me to do a new one so they could use a better logo. Well, their Fireball logo was pretty bad. So I said, I'm going to redesign your Fireball logo. You don't have to pay me anything for it. And I just did the same kind of format, just made it look better. But you know, it started off bad. So this wasn't an ugly story. It actually had a redeeming factor, and it kind of taught them that they should be working with creative professionals and not going through the crowdsourcing websites. So it went from bad to good. So that was kind of cool. Here's another one. There's a verse in the New Testament that says a prophet is never accepted in his hometown. I live in Salem. This is the capital in Salem. It's the capital of Oregon. And there is an agency locally that hired me to design some branding for the Capital Foundation, which is a group of people that promotes tourism for the Capitol building and the history and documenting everything that goes on with it. Note the cherry blossom trees out front. That was because a sister city in Japan with Salem had sent those years ago, and every year those bloom out front. They look beautiful. And so I thought that was a key part of the history. So we started working on this, and this is probably my favorite design we came up with. I like the fact that it says Oregon without spelling out Oregon. It's just OR. and it encapsulates the branding we came up with, which captures the essence of the Capitol building, denotes the cherry blossom just to add some beautification to it. I love the type, I love the coloring, and this is where it kind of starts to go off the rails. It's like, I don't think they need to do anything, but when you work with some agencies, they feel like they have to do something. They can't just say agree. They can't, oh, that looks awesome, let's go with it. No, they kind of push in different ways. So they asked me to come up with other iterations. And they said, could you take the cherry blossoms out? And I said, why? And they're saying, well, because there's talk with the council that they might tear out all the cherry blossom trees and get rid of them. And I'm like going, why would they do that? I go, it's just, okay, whatever. So I generified it down. It's still okay, but it's not as beautiful is what I think the actual experience is when you go there with the cherry blossoms, but whatever. And they wanted more green worked into it for, again, whatever reason, I'm not sure. And they wanted a river in front of it. And I go, there is no river in front of the Capitol. There's no river even close to the Capitol. It's like, but they wanted a river. I'm like, okay, so these are people in a board or committee making these decisions. I'm going, whatever. Okay, and, maybe you can show us other explorations. Well, we did that. We showed them other explorations, and they insisted on it having the river, which is dumb because it's like implying that it's flooding that area. The river's nowhere close to the Capitol. It's like at least 3 miles away. So I don't know why they kept insisting on that. These were some of the other directions. I still worked in the cherry blossoms into another one, the bottom left. And then the bottom right is kind of inspired by some of the architecture. It's Art Deco architecture for the Capitol. And I played off of that with the word Capitol in it because that's how they inset those areas into the side of the building and areas. And I thought, hey, I could showcase that. Ultimately, when it was all said and done, they ended up going with this, which I don't know who created it. It's okay, but it's like Oregon Capitol isn't a bank. This is like, what, you're going to go make a loan now? I don't know. I just really do not like this at all. It's too sterile. Doesn't really mean anything other than, ooh, that's a big concept there. So unfortunately, this went off the rails. I wouldn't call it ugly. I just call it not very inspiring. And that's what they want to do. They want to inspire people to know about the Oregon Capitol and its history and whatever. That's the way it goes. Here's another one. This is another one for Upper Deck. When I freelanced for them, they said, hey, Vaughn, we need to create a set of trading cards and they're going to be scratch and sniff. We need you to design the little symbol that's on the card that says scratch and sniff. And that's what the coding that will go over that so they'll know where to scratch and get the smell they want. And I go, well, what are we doing? What's the kind of smell? Well, it's going to be gross stuff because the brand we bought out is called Gross Out. And we want to have really kind of disturbing kind of smells. And I go, okay, this right up my alley. Let's do it. And here's a bunch of the cards I came up with for the categories they gave me: body odor, the dump, vomit, farts, Limburger, dog breath, earwax, and toe jam. Now, I love the body odor one because notice it's a geeky like Star Trek person. He has BO. I thought that one was probably one of my favorite ones. Now, all of these are going to go to kids. So do kids get offended by this kind of stuff? Heck no, they love this kind of stuff. And by the way, the empty space at the top of the card, that's where the brand logo type goes, called Gross Out. That's where that would drop in. Now, they didn't provide me with that logo. I saw an image of it before I started, so I just left that amount of area for it. But I thought this was a pretty fun project. Probably my favorite was this one that I illustrated. It's pretty extreme. I like the puckering butthole aspect to it. I thought it came out. Now, all the shading on this, I just created dithered TIFFs and just masked them into shapes in this case, I did this with freehand before I switched to Illustrator. But it's a great way to do this style, and it's not too hard. I might do a movie on this to kind of show you how you can work that way, because you can do it in Illustrator just as easy as you could in freehand. But this is obviously my favorite one. I couldn't wait for this project to get printed and get samples of it and send it to people, because it'd be hilarious. Well, some brilliant marketing director, and usually I'll just point out this way, anytime a project goes off the rails, you can almost always be able to blame it on some idiot marketing director. And this is no different, because a marketing director came in, looked at all these. We can't print these. The parents won't like these. Well, they're not for the parents. They're for the kids, and the kids would think these are hilarious, and they would sell a ton. And he thought, oh, I don't know, these are a little too gross. And ultimately, they had bought this brand so they could do stuff like this. And the marketing person decided he was going to be offended for everybody and not let anything go forward. And so even though they bought this brand, they never utilized it, never did anything with these. So that kind of sucked. I don't like that thinking. Just, take a little risk, and put it out there. Yeah, some parents might get offended by it, but they get offended by garbage pail kids as well, So anyway, this was a project I did all the work for. And yes, I invoiced for all the work I did and I got paid for it, but it never actually came to fruition and was never produced. So if you need some really cool gross out artwork, give me a call. We'll talk. Here's another one. This is a strange type of situation here. Is a small agency owned and operated by two Orthodox Jews, which I don't care. That's fine. But every time they wanted me to work on something, this was a project where their client locally had this logo and they didn't think it was too great, but they didn't want to change it. They just wanted me to refresh it to make it work better and look better. And I said, yeah, I can do that. But the thing with this agency is they'd say, okay, could I have a call with you at this time on this day? I said, sure, we can do that. I get on the call and the creative director would never get on the call with me. He would be in the background and his assistant would be talking to me, and I would ask a question. Then I could hear him ask the creative director, and he'd be literally yelling it back to the guy on the phone. I don't know why he would never talk to me in person, but that's the way every project went. It was the weirdest thing. And I'm just going, am I the only one that thinks this is really strange? It was like really bizarre. So I would take a project like this and I would update it. And I did a lot of projects for him like this. So I thought this one came out pretty cool and looked better than what they had. But there was some different projects they would bring me that were a little odd. The next one, I want to kind of go over the characteristics they said they needed for this logo design. And that's what they called the logo design. Now, I wouldn't call it a logo design. I call it an illustrated graphic, not a logo design per se. But these are the attributes they wanted in this logo design information they provided. We want a group of rabbis. Okay, anytime somebody wants a group, that's always harder to do a group. I'm going a group and a logo? Really? Okay. One is playing a fiddle. Okay, is this like Fiddler on a Roof or whatever? And they said, and they all have to be in a wagon. I'm like, what? I'm good. Like, what do you mean a wagon? A horse-pulled wagon. Okay, that's very complicated for a logo, but okay, is there anything else? Yeah, it needs to be flying over the Brooklyn Bridge. And I'm going, I'm just thinking, what the hell? What's that supposed to mean? And I'm going, okay. Anything else? Yeah, the New York skyline in the background, all for one logo. I'm going, again, this isn't a logo. So this was the information they gave me. And the text that goes with it, by the way, is the magic wagon. I'm going, okay, well, I would think the horse is more magical because it's pulling the wagon, but whatever, the magic wagon. Yeah, I can create a graphic for it. And I did. This is the graphic I created for it. I go, there's no way this can be an illustration. So I'm making them all silhouettes because it's easier. Otherwise, I'm going to spend an ungodly amount of time. So this is what it came out to be. And that was that. It was, I don't like it. I don't know if I've ever shown this to anybody other than my wife, because I said, you got to see this. This is strange. So there's that. So ultimately, I ended up firing the client because it just became a relationship that just wasn't, their budgets were always too low. Some of them were fun, but ultimately I outgrew that client and decided to kind of cut ties. Here's another strange one. This is just a strange one. They wanted, the name they had was Snorkel Cat, and they wanted branding for it. And I go, why? I don't even remember. I should have looked up the brief they gave me back then, but I didn't. But this Snorkel Cat came up with these two ideas. They said, well, we want it more realistic, kind of like this style you did. And I go, okay, so I can do Snorkel Cat, and did it in the style that they had pointed out. Ultimately designed a business card for him. Again, I don't even know. You could check this domain. I don't know if they're still around or not. They're based in the Seattle area, so can't even remember. I just thought it was always kind of a weird type of creative project to work on. Here's another one. I might have covered this in a previous movie, but it's still a good story. This is a company that is an executive assistant company. They find executive assistant talent for CEOs. And within that industry, this is the business-oriented industry, they refer to them as kangaroo stars, the CEO assistants, because they kind of hop to it and get things done. That's kind of the thinking behind it. So they wanted a brand mark that represented that. I worked with an agency. And so this was part of the first round. And the lady, the president of the company, said, I don't like any of these. Can you do more kangaroos, but show me different styles? I'm going, well, it kind of showed you 4 different styles here. Okay, so we did another one, did a linear one, did a couple different poses, did one that's kind of thick line style. She didn't like any of these either. Now, the agencies, they liked everything I did at each stage. And then I'm going, okay. And she's going, can you do something more abstract? And I go, what do you mean abstract? Like Picasso abstract? Yeah, kind of Picasso, but use like red and yellow and blue. And I going, okay. So me and Savannah worked on these. We came up with these. And I was just thinking, before we even started drawing anything out or building anything, I was going, there's no way this is going to work. Then when I got done with them, I go, okay, these are kind of cool, different. I would have never thought of going this direction, but whatever. I could live with this. This is kind of cool. We showed them to her. Guess what? She didn't like these either. But she said, I like the colors. It reminds me of the Baja style. Can you do a brand mark in the Baja style? Yes. And so we did these. She didn't like these either. Ultimately, she went back with the original design we created, but she changed all the color to gray and then complained that it didn't have enough color. That was about the time the agency that hired me fired her. And the project just kind of ended. I don't even know what they're using now. Maybe it's the gray kangaroo or whatever, but that's kind of what happens at times. It's out of my control. It's another agency's client. They fired him. They agreed she was difficult to work with, and I agreed with them, and that's how this project ended. Here's another project hired by a local company to rebrand an architectural firm. These were some of the directions I came up with. The name is AC Plus Company Architectural Community, and I really like these directions. I don't even know, and I suspect that the agency didn't even show these to the architectural firm. I just don't think they wanted to. I think they had some of their own ideas, and I think they felt maybe, I don't know for sure, but I think they felt maybe that these made those not look so great. And what they ended up with kind of looked like the one in the middle, minus the dimensional aspects and stuff to it, but done in a really bad way. So that's an agency I don't really do much work for anymore because I just don't, nothing comes out great with them. It's always kind of weird the way things come out. So I don't want to work with them anymore. So not a fun project. I like what I came out with. And I don't know, if you're an architect and you need a logo, give me a call. Maybe we can adapt some of these. Here's another one, advanced refrigerator and air. The owner wanted it to, he's saying, I want to see some that utilizes a polar bear or a penguin. And he also had one that wanted to represent cold. And I did all these brand iterations for him and explorations. Didn't like any of them. I ended up doing 20 something. Didn't like any of them. And so I basically had to fire a client. So over the years, I've worked with a lot of clients. Most of them go pretty well. Some of them just kind of go off the rails. This was a company that did color matching and kind of scientific color-based calculations for manufacturers. So they can nail a color and reproduce it, and it's always the right color, that type of thing. Not offset printing or anything like that. And so these, and they're called Invisios. So these are some of the directions I came up with. They didn't go with anything I came up with. And I thought I came up with some great ideas, good logo type, but again, couldn't make them happy. That's just the way it goes at times. Here's some other ones where I thought I came up with some good concepts. Circadian Company was a juice company, and they wanted to play off the circadian rhythm. And so I said, oh, I can work with that. You know, the moon, the sun, and kind of came up with a nice motif, cool typography. It's a juice company. They can have some character to it. And they didn't like anything I did. Then they decided maybe just do a sundial. I did concepts like that. They didn't like anything. So whatever, they didn't use it, but I always liked that design, thought it came out good. Reach Church didn't go with this direction, but I thought it was beautiful. They went with another direction I came up with. That's fine. These are all orphan designs, I guess. And Slick Plan, this is all about an online service called Slick Plan, where a team can create and plan and strategize for a website, and it gives them controls like the workflow that shows how one thing, if you click on, goes here. And that's what I use to capitalize it. He said it's a friendly environment. It's a friendly way to collaborate, and it's enjoyable. So I said, hey, I'll turn that into a happy face, but it represents the web flow of a site design. And they didn't like anything I did. Then he said, hey, what if you did one where it's playing off an animal metaphor, because it's like they're working together. So it could be almost like a symbiotic thing. And I go, yeah, I can work with that. Did that, created one of the best designs I think I've ever done. They didn't even go with that. So you can do everything you want correctly, but it doesn't mean the client's going to like it. This was a friend of mine him and another friend started a distillery business, and they're calling it printers because one is in design. And so he was inspired by the fact that the founder of of a print shop in that area was the one that brought printing to the Pacific Coast back in the day. He was a settler. And I said, cool. So I kind of looked him up and saw what he looked like and developed this design because I thought it just kind of goes with the history and it looks cool. And they went with a different direction, which actually wasn't a bad direction. I just like this one so much better. So I guess this isn't really that bad. It's just disappointing, I guess, that they didn't go in this direction. So that's the way it works. That's how design goes. And it should remind you that you'll create a lot more work that will never be chosen or used than you will design that will be used and seen by others. That's just the nature of the game. And so with that said, let's dive into the ugly. I almost said I saved the best for last. I would say the most entertaining for last because these are complete train wrecks is what I'm going to show you here. So let's just dive right into it. The creative process is not perfect. You can do everything right. That doesn't guarantee that everything's going to go right. Let's talk about design batting average. Now, I know some of you aren't into sports and don't care about baseball. I love baseball. So I think every designer has a design batting average. And if you're not sure what a batting average is, think of it this way. For let's say you have 10 at-bats and you get 3 hits. That means your batting average is 300%, and that's considered an all-star level batting average. So you only have to be successful out of 10 at-bats 3 times to be an all-star. Doesn't work that way in design. So what's your design batting average? How many projects do you get a single, a double, a triple, or a home run on? And how many projects do you strike out on? That's kind of what I'm kind of using it as a metaphor here. So this brings up the fact that in design, unlike sports, it's subjective. You can make stuff that looks beautiful. You know, based off of experience, it's going to work great. It fits the target audience, but the client can still not like it. So there was a product called Nutra Gardens. And Nutra Gardens was started by a former chef. Now, that chef had put out a book on cooking, and it became a bestseller. He lives up in the Portland area. And then, for whatever reason, he decided to become a vegan. And he didn't like that his book was selling so well because it wasn't a vegan cookbook. It's like, okay, whatever. So he decided to create vegan powdered vegetable supplements based off of beets originally. I think he does other ones now. And he called that Nutra Gardens. Well, he contacted me because he wanted to rebrand because what they were using was really bad. And so these were some of the initial explorations I created for Nutra Gardens. The one on the left worked in that kind of beets color since that's their primary. The second one was more just green to represent plants in general. Still, the other logo type, again, utilizes that beet color, but I handled the typography as hand lettering just so it was completely unique, and then created a version that you see with the N in the furrows of the garden growing and the sun and Nutra Gardens. Now, he didn't like any of these. Didn't like them at all. And then he said, well, what if you did one that was more leaf shape and had a sun in it and those the fields? I go, yeah, I can do that. So I did this one. He didn't like this one either. And he said, what if it's more leafy? And I go, like this? And he didn't like this one. He didn't like this one either. I go, okay, well, I'm not sure I understand what you want. And this is where he says, I want it more organic. Okay, well, I can do that. He goes, it looks too clean. Okay, so like more organic shapes, right? And he said, yeah. So I did this. Didn't like this one either. And then he decided, you know what? I think I want it to look like this. And he literally sent me this sketch. And I'm going, sun is shining on the leaves. Okay, so you really want to spell it out. I'm going, And what is that a sun in the background? What is that? Is that throwing stars, or I don't get what that is. And he goes, no, that's a sun. And I go, okay, I guess I can work with it, but this looks pretty close to your old logo. And apparently he had done his old logo too, so whatever. And I said, well, let me play with this and I'll come up with something. So I showed him this one, didn't like this one. Showed him this one, didn't like this one either. He sent me this. I think we need to have the sun, but make it geometric in some way with motion. I'm like, why? I just think that's what's going to work. And then you could have a field underneath it. Is like the sun is coming up on NutriGardens. Yeah, that's what I had in my original idea. It's like, but okay. So I did this. He didn't like this either. He's going, well, why does the sun look like that? I go, well, I was trying to show motion. Well, he didn't like this either. Big surprise. Ultimately, I ended up having to let him go. Just say, look, I don't think I'm going to be able to help you. I don't really think you know what you want. And I don't work on, I'll just keep designing stuff until you might like it and shooting in the dark. That's not the way it goes. And he kept contradicting himself at every stage. Now, this design, I thought this could be very successful for him. I think the branding, I was going to do his packaging. I could see the packaging working great with this. But nope, he didn't want to move forward with any of them. Fine, cut him loose, let him go. He got mad that I still wanted to charge him for everything I did. I go, dude, you wouldn't hire a plumber, have him start doing the work, and then not like the toilet and then not want to pay. It doesn't work that way. I go, you're a chef. Well, I think I use cooking analogies so it would sink in. Ultimately, I submitted this to Logo Lounge and it got in Logo Lounge 14. So I was happy about that, even though the client hated it. What he ended up using, I found out about a year later, is this is what he ended up with. It's like, it looks inspired by Netflix. And whatever, doesn't have any of the things he thought would be game winners. It's just a kind of a boring logo type. So whatever, that's the way it goes. They get what they deserve, in my opinion. Here's another one. Local agency here in town where I live said, hey, Vaughn, we want you to do a couple banner designs. So this was one of them. This is another one I did. And this is what I mocked up so they could present it to the town committee because this was to inspire, encourage people to shop in downtown. And this got rejected because the committee decided it was too creative. That was literally their feedback. This is too creative. Okay, didn't know that would be a problem, but whatever. And so they never used this. And for years to come, and I tried to find images of these, but I didn't create them, so I don't have them. They used Dover clip art on all the banners. So for years after this, I'd be driving downtown at a certain time of the year, and I'd see all these ugly banners, just knowing they could have had mine up there, and they decided to go this route. So that's always fun to be reminded of that. But yeah, don't be too creative. That's a problem. And this brings up committees. It's either a marketing director or a committee that causes projects to go off the rails. And let's dive into it. So here's the Cascade Lakes area in Oregon. Is a beautiful area of a bunch of lakes. You see a bunch of mountains, a bunch of water-based activity and hiking and biking and canoeing and inner tubing. It's a beautiful area. And Oregon's oldest craft brewer, the first craft brewer in Oregon, approached me because they wanted to rebrand. They were called Cascade Lakes. Well, the images you're seeing here says soda company, and I wanted to explain it. And that is when I did this for my LinkedIn Learning course, for whatever reason, they don't let you show anything that refers to alcohol because of their enterprise licensing agreements with different companies. So I had to change this to soda company. But if you Google Cascade Lakes Brewing Company, that's actually what it was. And so it just replaced soda company with brewing company. This was the first round of directions we came up with. They didn't like any of them. We did more. They rejected these, obviously. We did some more, and I said, hey, before we do another round, I want you to pull together a mood board. So they did. And they said, these are kind of the vibe and feel we're thinking. Obviously, mountains. And I go, okay, I can work with this. I can do that. We did another set of design directions. And one of the things he asked for that wasn't in their mood board is he said, do something unexpected. And I go, well, what do you mean? Just something completely off, like something out of left field that we're not requesting that you think would be cool. And I go, okay, I can do that, but I doubt they're going to go for it. And so that's where I did the bear with Cascade Lakes. Yeah, they didn't like any of these either. And these all align with their style guide or their mood board that they put together. And I'm going, I don't think these people know what they want. So, of course, these were rejected as well. Well, come to find out, what the owner and the investor of the company didn't tell me was they had a committee. They were running a committee of investors that they were running these by. Well, that's the problem. I don't know if I would have taken it on if I knew that was how they were going to do it, or I would have insisted on one point man to make the final decision, not a committee. Why did I say that? Because committees don't really agree on what's best. And I want to show you something, and that is, this is Ellie Altman. He's a creative director, and his agency is really proficient in developing naming for products and other brands. And he wrote a book about it called Don't Call It That. And because he's all about coming up with unique brand names for products and companies. And in his book, he talks about a principle called the ice cream principle. And this is how he explains it. Nothing ruins creativity like too many voices weighing in. We call it the ice cream principle. Tell 10 people to go get ice cream with one condition. They all have to agree on one flavor. That flavor is going to be chocolate or vanilla every time. Groups of people don't agree on what's cool or interesting. They agree on what's easy to agree on. Don't pick a name strictly because it's the top vote getter. And I would say the exact same principle is true for visual-oriented graphics. And that's what happened with Cascade Lakes. They couldn't agree on a design. So what they did is they agreed not to agree on any of these and not to utilize any of these design. And instead, they approached an interior designer who took clip art and created this. Again, it was brewing company, not soda company. And this is what they moved forward with. And I was just like, whatever, I give up. I give up. Whatever, enjoy it. Well, this hasn't even lasted over time for him because they've now become a nonprofit brewer. I don't know how that works, but whatever. Here's another project hired by an agency to rebrand a municipality in the outskirts of Chicago called Deerfield Park District. This is what their logo existed of. And I'm going, yeah, I think we can improve on that. Now, this project started in late 2019 and bleeded into 2020. What happened in 2020? Oh, it was COVID. So we were working on this the first 2 months of 2020. And this was the direction that they were settling on. And it looked like they were going to go with this direction. I'm going, great. I think this came out beautifully. I love the typeface. I love the graphics we came out with. It communicates better. And we have a bunch of different variations so they can use it on their city vehicles. They can use it on signage. It's going to work great for them. Well, then COVID started rolling out. And that's where they decided, you know what, we're going to shelve this entire project and just keep what we have. And we had developed all these other designs for them. Now, the one in the bottom right was the primary brand mark. The seal was something they could put on their vehicles like this, which would have looked beautiful. But now everything, they put the kibosh on everything because I think it's because they were fearful that people think they are wasting money. And again, it was a committee that made this decision. So they could agree on not doing anything because they could all agree on that. They couldn't all agree on sticking with the idea that they were leaning towards. And this brings up something else in terms of their branding. I was just going, really? They're just going to stay with this? I'm talking to the agency, not them directly. And I go, could you at least talk them in just to let us clean this up so it just looks better in general? Because that type's horrible. The trees are just lame. And we can improve the deer. It wouldn't be a fundamental design change. It would just be like polishing a turd, if you will. That's literally what I said to him. And that's basically what we did. And I'll show you that in a little bit. But in the meantime, I want to share a quote from Paul Rand, because I didn't hear this quote until about 5 years ago for the first time. And I'm like, where was this quote? This makes total sense. And he has a quote that says, "The public is more familiar with bad design than good design. It is in effect conditioned to prefer bad design because that is what it lives with. The new becomes threatening, the old reassuring." Think about it in context of the brand identity for this city. The old is reassuring. The new, they don't know if people will like it. So guess one's more comfortable and easy to say yes to? It's sticking with their old brand. And yes, we polished the turd and we improved it a little bit without fundamentally changing it. So that's never fun when that project happens. Here's another one. This happened years ago, probably around 2004 or something like that. Now, when I was in art school, Union Bay was a really popular sportswear company. At that time, they had grown to the point where a Chinese-based company had bought them out. I don't know when, but in 2004, they were owned by a Chinese-based company. And Union Bay is based up in Seattle, right by Union Bay, the water inlet. And they called me up and said, "Hey, could we fly you up to Seattle? We want you to help us with a new line of clothing." And I go, "Yeah, I'll do that." So they flew me up there. I met with them. This was one of the brand marks I created. Here's another brand mark I created. And you might wonder what 8 is. Well, after meeting with the creative director and talking with them for like 3 hours, come to find out that they want a lot of red in these designs because the Chinese like red, and the number 8 is a positive number for them. So they want 8 worked in somehow. And I go, okay, well, I can do that. And I did it here. And we want you to do a line of sportswear with active themes and sports themes. And we want it to be somewhat retro. And I go, okay, I can do that. And so this was like one example of the design I created. And it's kind of retro in that it's an old style kind of hiker, but I thought it could be imprinted on this brownish kind of color shirt. And we worked in that 8 and some red. And I thought this was going to work great. So I started, he pointed to a couple designs of mine at the times where I did this kind of collage look. And he said, "I think that would look good." And I go, "Okay, great. We want a total of like 12 designs." I go, "Okay, so I'll start working on it." And then once I get it done, I gave him a date that we'd deliver it to him. Well, I did that. Also developed all these bugs for him. These could be sewing on patches or injection molded type of patches that are sewing on to their different products. And in total, I created about 12 designs for him. Now, my files are really old. This was all when I was using freehand, by the way. So I have a few designs I can show you. Here's another bug. This one specifically was turned into this kind of badge design, and you can see it looks kind of distressed and everything. So this is one of the designs I created. But the sports related ones look kind of like this, where I use some of the same elements from other designs, drop typography to it. Here's another one where it's this globe again. We're utilizing some of the same attributes like this to pull off the design. And these were a lot of fun to create. We created a novel one. They wanted one in there that's just one color. I go, I can do that. So I came up with this idea. Just a lot of fun stuff. But they got a whole line of designs. They weren't sure if they'd use all 12, but from that, they would cherry pick like 7 designs. And so I got all of these things done and sent out, even did all these asset graphics like this, where I distress stuff. I did a scratch board of an eagle because I thought that'd make a cool type of t-shirt. And all these things I sent off to him. Well, I hadn't heard anything. And it had been a couple weeks. So I sent an email to the creative director and I say, hey, have you had a chance to look over the designs? What do you think? And then he says, I didn't like any of them. And I'm like, what? What do you mean you didn't like any of them? And he said, well, I wanted you to do 12. You only sent us 7. And I go, what are you talking about? I go, I sent more than 12. I think I sent like 14, something like that. And he goes, you did? And I go, yes. And he goes, hold on, I'm going to call you. So he calls me. And he said, you sent 14 designs? I go, yeah, I sent 14 individual designs. And he's going, well, our art director only showed me 7. And I go, and he said, well, can you send those to me? Send them to my email, not the email that I'd given you previously. And I said, yeah. And I sent it to him. And like 10 minutes later, he calls me back. And he says, okay, I want to apologize to you. I don't know why, but my art director didn't show me any of these. She showed me 7 designs, but they're not even the ones you sent. I need to get to the bottom of this. I don't know what's going on, but could you do me a favor? There's a letter that's going to show up in the mail. Can you just delete that? And I'm going, okay. And he's going, I'll get back to you. And so we ended the call, and the letter showed up the next day. And it was just read me the riot act. And I didn't throw it away. I still have it in my flat file. But long story short, what came about is that the art director, I had just dealt with the creative director. The art director for Union Bay at the time, she didn't like the fact that he was farming out work. And so she sabotaged all the work I sent, only showed 7. It wasn't even my designs. Not really sure what ever happened to her, but I'm sure she got in trouble. But that was a first for me. That was no fun. So ended up being okay. Never did get samples from him, so whatever. So yeah, not a fun experience, but never had that happen since. So that's a good thing, I guess. Here's another one, Artigiani Gelato Italian. It's a store in the Chicago area. This was what their old branding was. Hired us to rebrand them and redesign all their packaging. We rebranded them, came up with this brand identity for them, which I think looks great. Even sold them on the idea that they could get a neon sign created of this for the in-store of the brand. He loved that idea. And then, of course, we designed the packaging. So whether it's coconut, use some stock photography, have the Italian map in the background. This is Caribbean coconut flavor. Design custom icons for the halal and the gluten-free and the hormone-free, but utilize the brand colors as well in their packaging. This is the cookies and cream. So you could see how it works as a family. All of these would wrap around cylinder-based packaging, and the top we'd design as well. He loved it. Everything was done. I had set up all the files ready for print and had sent all of that off to him. And he was so excited about it, he went to a distributor that he had just signed an agreement for that distributor to distribute his product. And he was going to make $200,000 on that distribution deal that he made. And he said, hey, check out our new branding. Look at how great our packaging looks like. And for whatever reason, that distributor goes, I like your old packaging better. And then, guess what? He didn't want to use anything. He wanted to stick with what he had because he is afraid he is going to lose $200,000 deal because the distributor didn't like his packaging. I don't know why he gave the distributor that much control. That doesn't make any sense. It's his company. He goes, well, this is what we're doing. If you don't want to distribute, we will find somebody else to do it and put the pressure on him. But he didn't do that for whatever reason. And I'm going, well, that kind of sucks. And so I invoice him for all my work because all the work's done. And then he doesn't want to pay me. And then I'm going, you signed the work agreement. You knew what the cost was going to be. I did all the work. That's out of my control that your distributor doesn't like it. You like it. You had no problem using it. And now you don't want to, but you don't want to pay for it. I go, no, it doesn't work that way. And his literal comment back to me was, I'd rather pay my lawyer than pay you. So at that time, I was done talking to him. I just turned him over to a collection company, and they hounded him until he paid my invoice minus $50. And on the work agreement, it says if it's not paid in full, he can't use it. So guess what? If he ever uses this, then I'm going to go put a cease and desist on it because he didn't pay me the full value that he assigned the work agreement on. So it's a good argument for having a work agreement to hold people accountable because not everybody is ethical. So that kind of sucked. I really like the packaging, was looking forward to seeing these, on the real product in the real world. So again, the public is more familiar with bad design than good design. It is in effect conditioned to prefer bad design because that is what it lives with. The new becomes threatening, the old reassuring. So Rand Paul was a very wise man and made the call many years back, and it's still proves to be true in my opinion. So here's one of the last stories I'll tell you. My art rep was contacted by an agency who will not be named, but they contacted me saying, hey, our client's Disney. Disney just bought a brand from John Chandler Presents called The Scrumps. And this is just a house font that they have here. And we want you to design a logo type for The Scrumps. And I go, yeah, I'll do that. What's The Scrumps all about? Well, it's like puppets, and it's going to be produced by Henson, who Disney owns. I go, okay, sure, this will be great. So I start working on it. These are what the Scrumps look like. These are figures based off of the puppets that are in the production they do, or did. I don't think it's on air anymore. And so we just started doing some brand exploration, ended up on this one. It's hand lettering. They loved it. They thought it fit the attributes of the show and the characters, and they were all happy with it. The project was all said and done. It was about 4 months after the fact. And I was curious if it was okay to show it yet, because I signed a non-disclosure. Well, no, I didn't sign a non-disclosure, but I purposely don't show stuff until I know it's okay to show stuff. But to be safe, I contacted the creative director and I said, hey, is it okay if I show the logo type I designed for the Scrumps? And she said, yeah, it's fine. And I go, okay, great, thank you. And I was actually in Florida speaking, and I get a call from my art rep, and he says, hey, the guy from such and such agency is really upset that you shared the Scrumps logo type. And I go, why? I called their creative director and asked permission. She said, it's fine. Well, as soon as you get home, can you remove it? And I go, yeah, I will. Well, I get home, and that creative director or the owner of the agency wanted to talk to me. And I go, okay. So he gives me a call, And he just starts reading me the riot act, just yelling at me, blah, blah, blah. I should effing sue you and I'm going to take your house. And as soon as he said that, I'm going, okay, well, this call is going to be over. If you don't settle down, I'm just going to hang up. I'm not going to deal with this. And he goes, well, why the hell did you show the logo? And I go, he goes, you signed a non-disclosure agreement. And I go, I didn't sign any agreement with you guys. You never sent me a non-disclosure agreement. And I go, I did call your creative director and asked her, is it okay if I show this? And she said, yes, it's okay. Well, she doesn't work here anymore. She shouldn't have given you that permission. I go, okay, well, guess what? That's a you problem. That's not my problem. But I'll remove it. Don't worry, I'll remove it. And it's just the way that somebody shouldn't handle a situation like that. And yeah, that wasn't fun, especially when he said, I'm going to take your house. I was like going, okay, whatever, we're done here, and moved on. So not a fun situation to be in, but, is kind of out of my control. I did all my due diligence, and it sounds to me like he had communication problems with his own employees. Now, here's the weird thing. Years later, we're talking 6 years later, the same agency contacts me. I think they forgot I had done scrumps for them, and they want me to do some branding for their for a cannabis company they wanted to rebrand. And I didn't remind them. I just said, I don't care. I won't remind them. I don't think they remember, but whatever. I'll still work with them. So in closing, you'll create a lot of work over the course of your career. And I'm sure you're also going to run into the good, the bad, and the ugly side of design, just like I have. Try not to let it get you down. In the moment, it's not easy to do that. And it's not really easy to see the humor until later when you can think back on it and just go, man, that was a train wreck. Or the absurdity of a situation. But there is a reason why people love watching train wrecks. It's because they're kind of fun to talk about with other designers and commiserate with them. So I have a lot of other design stories I could tell, but I might just save those for volume 2 in the future. Who knows? Until next time, thank you for watching People of Process. And as always, I hope this content helps you improve your own creative endeavors.